I'm pausing for it to start recording. Okay, we're good. All right, hi. I would like to talk to you today about self-love as a revolutionary act. Before I do that, I'll need to talk to you about a box. See, I have a box that I've tucked away into the dark, deep corner of the attic of my mind. It isn't like the box of shoes that sat at the end of the bed for months after moving into our house last year, waiting patiently for us to eventually unpack it. The box in my mind's attic is different. When I imagine it, I can see big, heavy chains crisscrossing and zigzagging, wrapped around gnarled and knotted planks of wood in an attempt to keep it closed up tight, secure, quiet. And unlike the neglected box of shoes at the end of my bed, which I would imagine would politely say, "Oh, sorry about that," when I bumped into it, that one in the attic comes to life when my thoughts metaphorically bump into it. A thought of, "I need rest," causes the chains to rattle as the box begins to hop up and down, a low, grumbling voice responding, "You haven't earned rest. You have to keep going. You have to do more." My box has a lot of things to say. Narratives and stories I've collected through my life, it regurgitates to me nearly automatically. I used to think I was taming this box when I would nod my head and keep pushing through to the next task, ignoring my need for a break. Thankfully, and I would be thankful that the box would settle down in response. It's strange because in some way I know that this box wants the best for me. In some way, these messages are coming from a place of love, wanting to see me do my best and be my best, but I've never questioned if it was going about it in a way that was really serving me. In my work as a therapist over the past however many years, I've come to realize that a lot of us have a box like this, a place where we bury the messages about ourselves. Maybe you felt that your value is conditional on how much you've accomplished that day. Maybe you felt as if it's conditional on fitting into certain beauty standards, being slim enough, white enough teeth, smooth enough skin, the right color of skin, conditional on never needing much, not being a burden, being as hyper-independent as possible. All stepped into this box we wearily side-eye every day, listening to it as it becomes restless and grumbling back these beliefs we've picked up along the way. The truth is that our culture reinforces these messages constantly. And I'm going to go ahead and a step further, and I'm going to say that our culture depends on us reinforcing and internalizing these messages. You have to do more. You haven't earned your rest. You must be more. You have to take the job promotion. You're not pretty enough, but you will be when you buy these potions and elixirs promising youth. Have I mentioned that we're not allowed to get old? So for me, choosing self-love has become an act of rebellion, saying I am worthy just because I am, saying my humanity is not up for negotiation, saying my existence is resistance, questioning who are these messages really serving. That is radical. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It's tricky though, isn't it? Somehow it's easier for us to look at each other, the person next to us, and affirm their worth. It becomes much harder to affirm our own. Another message we've tucked away. Everyone has the inherent worth and dignity, but not me. I have to prove it every day that I have worth and dignity. It would be selfish if I were to believe I just inherently had that. To go back to the box metaphor, it's easy for us to look at each other's boxes and see how flimsy they are. We notice the thin particle board planks, the chains look limp and cheap, probably picked up from Spirit Halloween last year. Though we're dubious at best when someone points out the flaws in our box, which might seem anything but dormant in our own eyes. But that's the thing though. Our proclamation that all people are worthy remains incomplete when we cannot claim our own dignity, our own belovedness. I posit to you that if claiming your own dignity and belovedness is selfish, then maybe selfishness isn't the dirty word our culture has taught us it is. Radical self-love in practice embodies our first principle in the intimate, most vulnerable way possible by believing it about ourselves. Maybe I've convinced you on radicalizing self-love, but how is it revolutionary? Well, to that I'll say that our systems of oppression rely on our doubting our worth. White supremacy thrives on internalized messages that people of color are less than, or they have the same opportunities as everyone else if they just work hard enough. Sexism thrives in a contradiction. Women should smile, but don't be flirty. Trans folks should be proud, but don't rub it in people's faces. Non-binary folks owe others androgyny, but they shouldn't trick anyone. And capitalism profits when we believe our value is tied to our productivity, and we can never have or be enough, so we better keep producing. You're not allowed to age, remember? Those potions and elixirs aren't going to be cheap. And ableism insists that our worth is measured by what our bodies can do rather than by the sacred fact of being alive. At this point, I'd like to share a story about some of the messages that I've unpacked from my box. I caught COVID in the summer of 2022, which eventually turned into pneumonia. My healthcare provider asked me about my stress when I went to the doctor 6 weeks later. I hadn't even realized how truly stressful the last few months had been. I had defended my dissertation, I had presented my internship capstone project, closed out clients, wrapped up a number of clinical reports, all while packing up the apartment to move back to Oregon the day after my internship ended. I needed rest. Okay, I thought, I can justify rest when I lay it all out like that. I had a blissful 6 weeks between the end of my internship and the beginning of my postdoc year. I was restless, sure, but I'd be back at it at no time. And eventually the time came back to go to work. I began ramping up my caseload as soon as I was onboarded. I took on clients over the next several weeks, aiming for that magical full caseload number. I was back, or so I thought. My first full-time week, I felt fatigued, drained. Towards the end of the week, I was walking my dogs outside when I fainted. Cue tunnel vision and a trip to the ER. It was the first time that I had been told that I might have long COVID, which was exacerbated by stress. I ended up having to drop down to full-time work and saw the immediate reduction in my physical symptoms, which was something, but that box had something to say about it. I could hear it coming to life, thumping, up and down, the red glow flickering between the gnarled, knotted woods, as an angry steam poured out of the cracks and it snapped at me. Why did you do all that work to get your doctorate just to do part-time work? Other people don't have the luxury to stop over stress. Why do you think it's okay for you? You have to do more. I didn't share that I went down to part-time work with folks for a while. My box conjured up images of skeptical faces, arched eyebrows, and words of comfort that didn't quite reach their eyes. My justification for rest fell flat. Moments of joy were laced with guilt. If I'm too sick to work, I'm too sick to play. So I'll ask you, who is really benefiting from these messages my box had taken upon itself to share with me? And who is really benefiting from the messages in your box? Audre Lorde said, caring for yourself is not self-indulgent. It is an act of self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Our UU tradition speaks of the interdependent web of all existence. Every strand is necessary, every being connected. My healing is tied to your healing, just like your healing is tied to mine. Self-love, like many forms of love, interrupts the machinery of oppression. It's reclamation of self, and it is crucial if we want to collectively heal. When I love myself, I can question the biases I'm holding without questioning my self-worth. When I treat myself with compassion, I create more compassion to give away. When I question the messages in my box with compassion and curiosity, I make space for others to sit with their box and to begin to unpack it. I'd like to travel back in time just one more for another story. I lived in North Dakota for most of my childhood and adolescence. Not the easiest place in the world to explore our queer identity or question the messages we receive from our community, media, and just about everywhere else you can think of about being gay in the early 2000s. I sat with these messages, and it just didn't seem right. Why was it anyone else's business who anyone else found love with? Wasn't it just enough to celebrate consensual love in any form? I decided the rhetoric around me wasn't going to work for me, so I teased it out and removed it from my box. Then came my sophomore year in high school. My best friend and I would take the bus from one high school to the other for theater class, because of course we were theater kids. One spring afternoon, we were riding the bus, and I could see my friend get really quiet, like really quiet. I remember casually checking in. Hey, what's up? Is something wrong? I'll admit I was kind of horrified and shocked to see my best friend burst into tears in front of me. My first thoughts being that I may have done something to cause it. Full body sobs, the ones that ache to just watch. They looked at me and they said, "Kat, I'm gay." Without thinking, I replied, "I know, but what's wrong?" It was their turn to turn to me in shock. It had never occurred to them that someone wouldn't share the same messages that their box had internalized. But imagine if my box had internalized those messages. Had I not healed and loved myself through the process, teased them out of my box, imagine the harm that would have happened in that moment. My friend's healing was dependent on my healing. I still had more to unpack, though. By the time I left high school, I was pretty sure I was queer. Anything outside of that just kind of left me shrugging with a, I don't know. It wasn't even until graduate school that I heard the term non-binary. Cue my box. What does that even mean? I don't get it. It's weird. Though life has a funny way of showing us things. Despite what my box was telling me, my caseload began filling up with gender-diverse folks. I realized my best work was being done with folks who identified as trans, gender non-binary, gender queer, and my personal favorite, a gender anarchist. Soon after, a little troubling question came along. Am I non-binary? Uh-oh. The box would have something to say about this. Sure enough, you're just looking for attention. You better prove it. I would spend hours journaling, reflecting on my childhood and adolescence, scraping together proof, so I didn't make a fool of myself or lie to others. My efforts never really yielded anything satisfying or concrete. There was no aha moment, but I was still pretty sure I was non-binary. Was I starting to understand it, being non-binary? Could I make others understand it if I just proved it? Was it really anything to get in the first place? Then I had a wondrously radical and rebellious thought. Who am I proving this to again? My box grumbled in the corner. Oh, right, that. This sparked another internal rebellion. What would happen if I just accepted that I am? What if I didn't have to make sense of myself in the context of these narratives that I've held on to? I don't know the finer details of the universe, but I can still appreciate the beauty of the night sky, can't I? And just like that, I gave myself another radical gift of self-love. My healing had been dependent on the healing of those I had been honored enough to work with. Oftentimes, my clients will conflate self-love with being selfish. Many resist engaging and giving them the same kindness and grace they so effortlessly offer to those around them. My recent go-to response is that self-love isn't selfish, and so what if it is? Maybe our definition of self-love is just another message in our boxes to examine more closely. Maybe our black and white thinking around the word selfish isn't really serving us. Self-love reminds me that I am part of something larger, that caring for myself sustains the community. When we love ourselves, we strengthen the web. In my final moments with you this morning, I'd like to offer some thoughts on how we can practice radical self-love. Arguably, and most important, I invite you to start by cultivating curiosity. My father used to tell me when I was younger to remember that there's magic in the world. The magic that I've found in the world is the ability to stay curious. When your box begins to rumble, growl, and groan, and take a moment to find the magic. Get curious. Ask yourself, these thoughts that I'm holding onto, who put them here? Who do they really serve? Are they serving me in the way that I think they are? For me, another concrete step is to remember that it's usually my inner kiddo who gets the brunt of those messages. And I talk to that kiddo with patience, gentleness, warmth, and grace. I don't always succeed, but I keep practicing. Over time, I've noticed that that inner kiddo has started to trust me more and more and more. Another source of magic, I think. Before I wrap up, I'd like to invite you to think of a message that your box likes to rattle and groan about. Can you think of a common phrase of self-criticism that often repeats in your mind? Maybe it's, I'm not good enough, or I should be doing more. Now invite the magic. Get curious. Imagine talking to that inner kiddo who's listening to those messages. Maybe you can say, I am worthy, I'm beloved, and I'm enough. That, my friends, is a revolutionary seed of self-love. Thank you.